Now in today's video we're going to ask the question, is it really worth the effort to grow vegetables in autumn or fall and into winter? Now depending upon which part of the world you're from, the temperatures can vary quite significantly, but usually when we get to the end of September and into October, in most parts of the world the temperature starts to decrease and the main growing season comes to an end. And at this point we have a decision to make. Do we end our growing season and just close everything down waiting for the new growing season in the spring? Or indeed, can we utilise the spaces that have now opened up in our gardens because we've harvested our main vegetables and grow vegetables for the autumn or fall or into winter? And in this video I'm briefly going to discuss 8 advantages of growing vegetables through the autumn, fall or winter, and also 8 potential disadvantages, and show you some of the vegetables I'll be growing through the autumn and winter period. So if you've never grown vegetables beyond the main growing season, then hopefully this video will give you 1 or 2 ideas. Now I'm based right in the centre of the UK, and in this part of the world we don't have really harsh temperatures like some other parts of the world. Here we may experience temperatures of between -8 to -10 at the lowest, so we do have issues with frost, but not to the level in other parts of the world. But nevertheless, there are still plenty of vegetables that we can grow in sub-zero temperatures, and growing some of them even outside. Now before filming this video I tidied up my raised beds and took out the last of my beetroot, the last of my carrots and a few other vegetables, and then I had a decision, what do I do with those beds? Do I leave them empty and I could cover them with manure and leave them for the next growing season in the spring, or could I do what I've already done and utilise that space and put some winter vegetables in there? And in fact in these 2 beds over here I have winter lettuce in the front bed over here, and in this bed here I have some spinach and pak choy and some other lettuce, and also at the back of the garden, which you've just seen when I filmed the introduction, on my previous potato containers, and now they're full of spinach, mizuna, Chinese cabbage and other winter vegetables. So as you can see, I've decided to utilise the spaces that I've got all through the autumn or fall and into winter, rather than leave them redundant. So it does show you that there's plenty of opportunity to utilise the space that you've got in your garden to continue growing beyond the main growing season. Now the first and obvious big advantage of growing vegetables through the fall, autumn or into winter, it just gives you a continual and regular supply of vegetables to a point where you might not even need to buy vegetables during that period. And of course by growing your own vegetables you choose which vegetables you like and which varieties you want to grow, so they're always on supply for you when they grow, and that's a massive advantage. Now there are plenty of other videos on my channel showing you what vegetables that you can plant in September, October, November, December and January, and I'll put some links to those in the comments below. So there's plenty of choice available, but of course it will depend upon your growing conditions and also what space you have available. Now I don't really have any indoor growing space. I don't have a greenhouse or a polytunnel, so all the vegetables I choose to grow outside. But there are vegetables that you could choose to grow in a greenhouse or in a polytunnel, even if they're unheated during that period. So the first advantage is it extends the growing season considerably and gives you that continued supply of vegetables that you wouldn't have until the spring when you start growing again. Now the warmer temperatures of late spring onwards and into summer in most parts of the world is perfect for lots of different types of pests, but as the temperatures start to decrease, so do the amount of pests. So you're not completely immune to pests by growing over the autumn, fall or winter period, but they are significantly reduced. So for example, in this part of the world, cabbage butterfly is a big problem, and they lay their eggs and they produce the caterpillars, and they can devastate a crop in no time at all. However, when we come to the autumn and winter period, that risk is significantly reduced. Now even though I've just said that, you may wonder, well, why have you got netting all over your vegetable beds? And that's mainly because at the moment these plants are quite small. I've just planted them and I want to protect them from birds, but the risk of pests is significantly reduced. Something else I particularly like about growing vegetables during the autumn and winter period is that there's a different variety of vegetables available to grow that I wouldn't normally grow during the main growing season. So for example, at this time of year, I'm now growing things like Chinese cabbage and different varieties of spinach and pak choy, which I wouldn't grow during the main growing season. There's even winter varieties of lettuce available, such as lamb's lettuce and winter density and other types of winter varieties. And that's also true of other vegetables. So there's a whole world of different vegetables to grow during the autumn, fall and winter period that I wouldn't consider growing during the spring and summer period. Another great advantage of growing at this time of year is it reduces the risks of vegetables bolting, and that's when, because of the heat, the vegetables grow so fast they're almost tricked into thinking they're coming towards the end of their life and they start going to seed. Things like arugula or rocket is a common vegetable that easily bolts, and even in the past I've had brassicas such as broccoli and cauliflower that have bolted in really warm conditions. That is highly unlikely in the cooler temperatures of the autumn, fall or winter. And in addition to that, another great advantage is because of the cooler temperatures, the amount of weeding that's needed is a lot less. Every vegetable grower will appreciate that in the main growing season, in those warmer temperatures, weeding is a full-time job. And that's something that's significantly reduced at this time of year, and therefore also a very welcome advantage to growing vegetables. Another really welcome advantage of growing at this time of year in autumn or in winter is there's a lot less demand on watering. In the main heat of the summer, it may even be necessary to water your vegetables more than once a day, but that demand is significantly reduced when you get to the autumn, fall or winter period. And that's because less sunlight and lower temperatures reduces the evaporation of the moisture that's around the vegetables in the soil and on their roots. And therefore watering is only really needed on demand at those times when you have dry periods. Now, watering of your crops at this time of year will still need to be monitored, but the demand is significantly lower than other times of the year. Now, something else that you'll also appreciate at this time of year is because we haven't got that intense sunshine or that intense heat, our vegetables will not suffer from sunburn or scorching, and that could be a real problem at certain times of the year, particularly if you're growing indoors. If you're growing in a greenhouse or a polytunnel, you might need to consider some form of shading at certain times of the year. Even if you're growing outdoors, you might need to think about shading if the sunshine is really intense. So clearly, at this time of year, that's not a problem at all. And one final advantage of growing vegetables beyond the main growing season through autumn, fall and into winter is just enjoyable. You don't have to stop growing vegetables in September, so therefore it just allows you to continue enjoying your garden over a much longer period of time. So there are so many advantages of growing vegetables over the autumn, fall and winter period, but what about disadvantages? Let's consider a few of those. Now, of course, one of the biggest risks and biggest disadvantages of growing vegetables during the autumn, fall and winter period is the risk of frost. Sub-zero temperatures will bring frost along with it, and that can have significant devastating effects on vegetables if they're not protected properly. Now, if I'm growing vegetables in outdoor conditions such as these, and I look at the weather forecast and a frost is predicted, what I'll do is I'll give an extra level of protection by adding fleece on top of the netting, or any vegetables around my garden, I'll just give them an extra level of protection. And that should be perfectly fine for the temperatures that we have here. In other parts of the world, particularly in the northern hemisphere where you've got severe cold temperatures, it probably won't be suitable to give them that level of protection, and you may need to think about growing your vegetables in indoor environments. But even then, if it's unheated, it'll still need a certain level of protection in the event of significant sub-zero temperatures. So the first disadvantage is how you consider protecting your vegetables in sub-zero temperatures, something you clearly don't get during the other parts of the year. Now, although I said that growing different types of vegetables is an advantage of winter crops that you can grow that you wouldn't grow at other parts of the year, another disadvantage is that there are limited amounts of vegetables that you can grow at this time of year. So, for example, in the warmer temperatures, you can grow pretty much any type of vegetables, but in the cooler temperatures of autumn and winter, the selection significantly reduces. So, for example, you can't grow things like tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and many other types of vegetables in the cooler temperatures. However, don't be disheartened, because as I've mentioned, there are still plenty of other vegetables that you can grow at this time of year. Now, the next two disadvantages are very closely linked. At this time of year, there's a significant reduction in the amount of daylight hours. Now, to the vegetables, that's not a good thing because they need light for photosynthesis to actually allow the plants to grow and develop. So therefore, the daylight hours will restrict the photosynthesis process, and that will impact on the growth of the plants. And because of that, the next disadvantage is your plants will grow slower. So whereas in the summer, some vegetables grow really fast because of the warmer temperatures, in the winter, they're a lot slower. But the point is they will grow, and it's just a mindset change compared to the summer where you just need to appreciate you will get your vegetables, but they just take a little bit longer. Now, if you live in a part of the world that has really significant sub-zero temperatures and therefore growing vegetables outside is not possible for you, it is possible to grow vegetables in indoor environments, but there is a cost attached to that if you decide to use heating or grow lights. And something else you have to consider and keep an eye on in the winter period is snow and ice. We don't get huge amounts of snowfall in this part of the world, but we do get some. And when it does snow, imagine this netting is covered in snow. The weight of the snow is going to force the netting down, and that could potentially damage the plant. And one big disadvantage is that when it does snow, you will need to be vigilant and go out to check your vegetables to ensure that the snow is not damaging them. And clearly that's something that isn't an issue at all at other times of the year. Now, I've already mentioned that less watering is a big advantage of growing vegetables at this time of year, but because of that, it is also so easy to overwater, because at this time of year the compost or the ground will remain saturated for a longer period of time because of the lack of heat and lack of evaporation. So therefore it can be very easy to overwater your vegetables at this time of year, which can be significantly detrimental to their growth. And the final disadvantage is just simply the fact that because of this time of year, growing conditions are completely different, and it's a whole different mindset compared to growing vegetables during the other parts of the growing season. And therefore you have to appreciate that it will be different, and therefore there's new techniques that you will need to learn in order to grow your vegetables successfully in the autumn, fall and winter period. Now, even though I've just given you a number of disadvantages of growing vegetables after the main growing season, as you can see here and as you've seen during the video, I'm a big advocate of continuing the growing season as long as possible into the autumn winter period. So for me, it's really beneficial to grow fresh vegetables all the way through the year, or as long as I possibly can. So I really hope the video has given you something to think about, and I'd love to know whether you grow vegetables in your part of the world over the autumn, fall or winter period. And whether you do or you don't, let me know in the comments below, and let me know what your growing conditions are and whether or not it's even possible to grow vegetables in your part of the world at that time of year. But thank you very much for watching, and I really hope that the video has given you one or two ideas and something to think about. And remember, if you've never grown vegetables before beyond the main growing season, as you've seen during the video, it is possible and you might want to give it a try yourself. And if you did like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to subscribe to the channel for future videos on how to sow and grow fruit, vegetables and flowers, and one or two recipe ideas, don't forget to press the subscribe button. I'll see you all on the next video.